This is the Fit Connection Podcast, linking classrooms and communities with what works in health and education. Here's your host, Stevie Ray Gray.
Hey everybody, time to get off the sidelines and get into the game. I'm your host, Stevie Ray Gray, and this is Fit Connection. When was the last time you planned a lesson and realized that a third of your class couldn't participate fully? Well, today, hopefully, my two guests will help us answer that question. I've got with us right now Dr. Tom Moran and Dr. Adam Forbes. Thank you so much for joining us today on the show, guys.
Thank you, Stevie.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Now, well, before we get started, I would love for you to actually just give like your full honorific. So tell everybody like your whole name and where you teach and what you teach and all that good stuff.
Dr. Tom Moran, professor of kinesiology at James Madison University and executive director of the Empowerment 3 Center, the Center for Physical Activity for the Underserved.
I don't have a nice title like Tom, but Adam Forbes, I'm assistant professor at Norfolk State University in their health and PE program. I was an itinerant adaptive PE teacher back in the day, but transitioned now to the higher ed role.
Awesome. And what do you do in the higher ed role? Just teaching future teacher candidates?
Yeah, it's future teacher candidates. Our program is geared towards gen ed PE teachers, but we also have, like other undergrad PE programs, we have one adaptive PE course, but we try to infuse that as well in other courses that we're teaching our students.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And Tom, you're still teaching all the JMU Dukes.
I do.
Do you teach anywhere else? I felt like for a while there you were teaching somewhere else.
I also was an adaptive PE teacher in New York State. So
Okay.
I taught at two different divisions in Western New York and Central New York.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So speaking of adapted, a lot of people are wondering about how we can modify some activities for our general education classes. So before we get into what that means, can you give me, either of you, or work together, to give me a definition of what adapted physical education is? Because there's a lot of people that just throw it out there. But in your mind, what would an adapted physical education definition be?
Mm-hmm. When I started out in my county, I had a mentor, and she gave me a simple definition of what adaptive PE is. She said adaptive PE is PE adapted.
Yeah.
We're focusing on, all right, we have our set curriculum, for health and PE. How are we going to now use that same curriculum, but now we have a student with a disability? How are we going to create that success for them? Okay. So it's not creating anything, from scratch, but you're utilizing what's available for you, but now, adapting or modifying for your student. And that kind of like stuck with me. It's kind of a simple phrase, and like, oh, okay, so it's not anything new. It's something that's, has been there for a long time. It's just, any good teacher is going to make changes to their instruction, to their lessons, but now we're gearing it specifically towards, students that might be in a gen ed PE setting that has a disability. Mm-hmm. How are we going to support them?
Yeah. And I would say Dr. Claudine Sherrill, who's considered the grandmother of adaptive PE, coined the phrase that all good physical education is adapted physical education, right? And so that reinforces the idea that adaptive PE is not a placement, right? It is a service. It is an opportunity for us to say, what are the abilities of all of our students? And how do I design activities in the environment so everyone can be successful?
Ah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So we've got a few schools and counties around the state that are starting to, say, take away funding from very specific classrooms. Okay. So say you have a classroom built for students with neurodivergence, or just students with like lots of diverse needs. And now we're saying, this was a very good space for you to learn in. It was the least restrictive environment. That gets tossed out a lot. Mm-hmm. And now we don't have the staffing or the money to keep people there for that classroom. And we are sending all these students that had a very specialized education out into other schools and other placements. And I don't want to call it like forced inclusion, but it's kind of like surprise inclusion. At the beginning of this year, a lot of students are back in gen ed, where it was been like a gradual inclusion. Now it's just like, here we are. As physical education teachers, myself being one, it has surprised us in the way that we plan lessons. So I guess my question is, like, if you were a gen ed teacher, and you all of a sudden plan this lesson, or you had lessons planned for like years and years and years that work for a specific population, what would be the first thing that you would start to look at when you need to try to check some of the modifications or adaptations that you can make for students that might need them? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just, kind of, I guess I wanted to kind of go back to what's the changes that are happening in terms of school district. We're going to push this kid to integration for the gen ed PE setting. But I think everything's going to go back to the student's least restrictive environment. And also it's going to go back to IDEA, which is the special education law that students with disabilities are afforded a free appropriate education. And part of that is physical education. So, for some school districts that might decide, all the students with disabilities are not going to have PE at all. Well, they're going against the federal law that says they're supposed to be receiving these services. And then, geared towards, students that might need a specialized instruction, which often is adapted PE, that setting usually would be, of course, you're going to go through an assessment, and not just, one assessment, but you're going to look at holistically, observe the student in the class setting, observe the student in PE, have conversations with the teachers to collect all that data to now you present it to the IEP team, individualized education program team, and then you're talking about what's the least restrictive environment for the student. And it might not be gen ed PE, it might be more of a small group setting. So somebody that just automatically says, we're going to push this kid into gen ed PE, well, if there's nothing backing up that decision, that it's going against what federal law says in terms of what students should be receiving. But in any case, it does happen. And, in terms of our roles at advocating for our students when it comes to PE and adaptive PE, that's like where we're struggling, especially with, certain individuals in the school that might, make that decision. But kind of go back to your original question, I think the first thing that I would do is just connect to the special education teacher, just build that collaboration and kind of gain more information about this particular student in terms of strengths, areas of growth, and usually one that I get is like interests. Like, what is the student interested in? And how can I incorporate that interest into the PE setting? Is it, the student has a couple of friends in class? Can I like make that connection? Or is there, something that I can do or add in my presentation where if it's like, the student likes Bluey, and maybe can I add that or have an activity that's geared towards there? And maybe the other, other students in class and peers might also love Bluey.
Of course, who doesn't
love
Bluey?
Yeah, so it could be just something as simple as that, or
watch Bluey by myself. I don't need my kids around with it.
But yeah, that's kind of the first. I would collaborate with, the special education teachers to get a little bit more information about the student and how I can, really understand and learn. And also, I would talk to the student as well.
Yeah.
And, create that relationship.
Of course, yeah.
And I would build off what Adam said initially about interests, and I'll just share an example. I had a young boy with autism that I couldn't get him to run, right? And anytime I said move or run, just sit down, throw an absolute temper tantrum, right? We found out that the kid loved cars, right? We're not talking cars, the movie. We're talking like, I want Mustangs, I want Corvettes, I want, right, the old-fashioned, muscle cars. And so I went and printed out a bunch of pictures of those. And I hid them all around the outside, grass space. And I gave him a worksheet and said, you got to go find all the cars. And he went from a kid that wouldn't run to a kid I couldn't get to stop running and actually engage in the rest of the class, right? And so you have to ask yourself, like, if I tie into that interest, right, will I hook that student? But then I'm going to go back and just share a couple other thoughts. I think first, we've got to ask the teacher. And so, Stevie, are you willing to change your lesson? Because if the end game is there, any ideas I'm going to share after aren't going to matter, because you're going to say, nope, I want to teach that the same way I taught it 5 years ago, the same way I taught it 10 years ago. So if you say, yeah, I'm willing to make some adjustments, then ask yourself, what abilities does that student have? And I think, because sometimes we get so locked in to the disabilities, the limitations, and that totally clouds everything.
Yeah.
And we've forgotten, oh my gosh, this kid's sharp as a tack.
Run up to the wall of what they can't.
Yeah.
You can't
And
get
so,
around it.
yes, I'm going to leverage the crap out of those abilities because maybe the limitations I can't change. Right. So I think that's number one. And then to build on that, I say, you can change the task. You can change the environment. to help the learner, but you can never change the learner. And I think sometimes we get so locked in, I want to change the learner.
Yeah.
No, change the task or the environment to make the learner do what you want him or her to do.
That's perfect. So as a teacher, when you're looking at a student, how would you approach that initial assessment to determine those strengths? Especially if you, like you said, can't, like maybe they for some one reason or another just refuse to do an activity, or they have shown like just a disinterest in it. So how do you, is there a tool that you use to assess those strengths or those general areas of growth that they might have to, work on to get there? Is there anything, I'm thinking from a general education point of view, I can think of several students right now that I would love to change my lesson for, but I can't figure out. Teachers can't give me any insights, and me and the student have a really good bond, but not enough to get them to actively participate in an activity. So is there any tips or strategies you have that would...
I mean, we just have an informal checklist that we use that we call an ability first assessment.
An ability first assessment?
Ability first assessment, right? Because we really want to get them to say, what are their abilities from a psychomotor standpoint, from a cognitive standpoint, from a social standpoint, from a communication standpoint, right? From a technology and instructional strategy standpoint, like, man, when I use an iPad, this kid locks in, or when it's presented in video format, they can really process it, versus Stevie, you can give some awesome demos, but they just can't make that, visual connection, right? Or that processing piece. Yeah. But that is purely just a checklist. Nothing has ever been validated. And again, I think that's a limitation in our field. We can say we've got some great fitness assessments. We can say we've got some great motor skill assessments, right? But do we have a good ability assessment? And I would argue no.
No.
Yeah. I think it's so hard to just, all students are going to be different in terms of their interests and strengths and areas of growth. So, especially the students that we're teaching, they're all going to be coming with their own quirks and their own perspectives, and it's, at least from my experiences, it was always, and kind of going back to what you said, Tom, in terms of looking at the ability, not the disability. I tended to always never look at the IEP. I always tended to get in there. I had at the beginning of the school year, I had a couple of like we're talking about like classroom routines or classroom expectations, so just to kind of like get the students going in terms of the PE setting. And I would just like individually interact with the students and get to know them that way, rather than having someone tell me, "Oh, this child has autism. They're going to have repetitive behaviors. They're going to be this or that." And I was like, "Okay, let me learn through experience, through teaching, and for them engaging with me."
Because most of the time IEPs are written from a standpoint of one single teacher. Or at least from the observations made by a teacher that might see them every single day in a totally different scenario, right?
Yeah.
In a different learning space. And that changes a lot when you get into the organized chaos that is health and PE.
Yeah.
So even something that they might be thriving with in class, that might, you might be triggered by that environment of a noisy gym or outside space.
Right.
Yeah.
You feel like that canvas has already been painted. Versus, I think, to Adam's point, I want to paint my own canvas on this kid.
That's really good.
Yeah, and kind of going back to what Tom was saying in terms of, or I guess Stevie, your question was on like how can we like get to know like the students' abilities and things like that. And that was like one way for me that I just observed the students. And I would set up activities where they're focusing on the routines, focusing on expectations, and then working in pairs or groups, and I can kind of see and observe on the sideline. Okay. The students
providing just lots of different scenarios. And
and it could be
collecting data.
It could be stations as well, and it's very informal. I didn't have any checklist. It was kind of just a mental note that I had. And outside of, we're not focusing on adaptive PE assessments and things like that, but I would also utilize like formal assessments, standardized assessments as well. To kind of build a picture, or at least my own canvas of this, what I know of this student, and kind of move forward from there. So I know everything is informal and things like that, and teacher observations and stuff, and I'm sure administrators want to have like a standardized something, but I don't know, for me, like, this kid is not going to fit into this box. I gotta expand out, give them opportunities to shine, and then I can kind of highlight the areas, or plan lessons around the areas that they need to grow.
Would you ever go outside of your teaching space to try to collect your own informal data, like if you have time, like who has time during a teaching day, right? Like I got a 30-minute block to eat sometimes, and I'm setting up for the next lesson during that. But if you can get into a classroom and observe a student that you might be having some trouble finding out what makes them tick, is that a good strategy to try to get them in like different environments, just observe them?
Are you asking like in like a classroom setting, or like
let's say,
recess, or maybe like if they're coming,
all of it,
getting dropped off and stuff?
all of it, yeah, if you have an opportunity to.
Yeah. I mean, if you got bus duty or something, and you're kind of observing the students, and you're always observing your students and talking to students and all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, one thing as adaptive PE teachers, and itinerant teachers, we had a little bit more flexibility to kind of move around in the schools, because we had 5-6 schools that we were supporting, so we had a chance
So
to
transient, you just bounced around.
yeah, so we bounced around. So we had a chance to kind of, see the student in PE, but also we could see the student in the classroom setting and how they do and things like that. But I know for a gen ed PE teacher, like you said, 30 minutes, you're in your lunch while you're setting up something.
Place.
Yeah, exactly. So it's hard unless you go out to recess or something, and you're kind of curious, or maybe you're setting up something during recess, or helping out a classroom teacher that wants to have some activities that they want to utilize. That might be a chance. And I think even like lunch too would be cool to see how the student interacts socially. Yeah.
And I also think the opportunity to observe other classes gives us a chance to see, like, maybe the classroom teacher really has some cool strategies that they've figured out. And unknowingly, Stevie, you created brand new strategies. And so now you're working harder. The student's confused because they have to do it one way in the classroom, a different, and sometimes that's environment different, right? And it has to be. But sometimes I think we could work smarter, not harder, and then we would actually serve the students better, right? Because we could all follow the same strategies, the same,
Oh, famously, the education communication seems to.
Right. Yeah, it's all well-intended people, right? It's just, would there be a simple way where we could say, man, we found that this works for Johnny. Everybody needs to use it, right?
So both of you are teaching future teachers. Yeah, you're both in, teacher education programs. Do you ever have students coming up to you and asking for advice about certain situations or scenarios? What would be what would be the most helpful piece of advice that you could give to like a brand new teacher who's going into a classroom scenario where there's a lot of diverse learners and maybe just a little bit or a lot of need? I'm not talking about like functional life skill classes or anything like that, but you've got like a collab class with a lot of IEPs and 504 behavior plans. Is there anything that you could say to new teachers that would make them feel a little more comfortable going into those situations?
Is that no?
Nothing at all.
I was turning to see if you had initial thoughts.
Nothing at all. Good luck, kids.
Johnny, go.
Yeah. Well, I guess for me, and I don't know, Tom too, we went through a grad program, so we had that chance in a grad program to kind of get our feet wet a little bit before we headed right into public school setting.
Was your grad program specifically designed for adaptive physical education?
Mine was yours, Tom?
Mine was,
Okay.
but unlike Adam, I actually was teaching as a general PE teacher at the time, and so I loved it because I could use, the things we talked about last night in my lessons.
You were doing farm to table,
right? I mean, I loved that, right? And I wish we could set up every single program like that, right? Because that is so important. I mean, I guess initially, and then I'll let you go back to your thought. I would go back to the last thing we were just talking about, like allowing them to collaborate with other professionals. Because there's nothing worse than you're excited as a teacher. You think you've come in with all these knowledge and skills and ideas, and now you're like, I just got out there and I can't meet the needs of a third of my kids, and now I just feel inadequate. So I think the first thing to do is getting them to talk to the special ed teacher, getting them to talk to the related service providers, and feeling like I've got a group of people behind me as I figure this out. And then really taking that ability first approach. I realize I've said it a couple times, but I really think if we take the dis out of disability, we take the fear that a lot of people now come to and say, all right, what of this can I control? And if all I can control is building in their interests, then great, we're going to do that right from day one, right? I need to build in rewards. What is it that's going to make this kid tick? Because I would argue, Stevie, you're going to ask the same question to that high-level athlete that you're trying to motivate. 100%. You're going to ask that same, question to the kid who's overweight that doesn't want to move. So we would ask the same question. Why do we panic so much just about disability?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll just add to what Tom shared too. I always, when I was having like a bad day and I never wanted to go into work, and I was like, oh gosh, like I wish I could just stay home and like not even deal with everything at school. I would always go to those people that I knew would like uplift me and like make me laugh. And usually it was a librarian. I'd always go to a librarian and she would make me laugh. And it was never like any words of like advice, but it was just like we would just conversate and just have
vibe,
random things. Yeah. Talk about family, talk about personal life, and laugh a little bit. But I think going back to Tom, finding, and I know it's hard for gen ed PE because it seems like we're always siloed. We're in the gym. Sometimes we don't go out and like interact with other classroom teachers or inner specialists. Maybe the music teacher or the art teacher, or the librarian.
They like to lump us into the same
grade
level meeting. And you guys,
you
guys over there.
Yeah.
Right.
Or sometimes we don't need specialists. We're totally good. But just like I don't know, finding people that you're able to like complain about things and laugh about it.
Yeah.
I think
and bounce ideas off each other. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you'll soon realize like everyone has the same concerns, the same struggles. And then once you identify those, you can talk more about it, whether it's a student or whether it's a class or whether it's a whole class of students. And then the second thing is I always tended to, even though things were like burning like down in like classrooms and stuff. And at one time I absolutely disliked the way that my gym was set up, but we had doors that went into the gym and we had back doors that went out to the parking lot.
I've got the exact scenario right now.
One time during a small group PE, self-contained PE, we had 15, 16 students. So everybody's working with a student. One student decided to dip out, and then a police officer picked up the student, brought him back to the school. Principal was walking down like angry, yelling. I was like, hey, it happens. Yeah. So it's like finding, I look back on it and I'm like, yeah, of course. Yeah. But like, I don't know, like just finding like all the positives, even though things are like, you're feeling, I don't know, overwhelmed with everything. I think what, I always tended to like look at my students, and I loved my students, they would always make me smile and laugh. And I had one student call me Mr. Forks. Nice. She couldn't say B. Yeah. I was like, oh, that's cool. Like you're still working on it. And I think a couple years later, I think she said, Mr. Forbes. I was like,
I would have been like, no, I can be Forks to you.
Yeah. So
Call me Forks forever, please.
Yeah. So it's like all these little things that, that one person looking on the outside is like, oh, whatever. But it's like all those small little things that just make you smile inside. I feel like, I don't know, help me not feel the burnout too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have one other thought, Stevie.
Go for it.
When we think about as teachers, we want to give every kid purpose. Right? And where are your students that are getting in trouble? Right? We end up sending them to the principal's office, and 99% of the time, it's because they lack purpose. And so, could a new teacher or any teacher, right? And let's say that for you, that's your 4th and 5th grade, and you've got 5 students in mind. Why the heck are they not coming into your kindergarten, 1st grade classes and being peer mentors? Because you know what? We can argue, yes, they're missing academics. Well, so are they sitting in the principal's office. So put them in a peer mentoring role. Give them purpose. And guess what? That might give you the resources you need, because you need somebody to chase those 4 kids around. Perfect. I've got kids that are causing trouble, shooting spitwads. So let's reimagine what this looks like, right? And maybe we can help teachers not feel burnout, not be stressed like Adam's talking. And we actually, at the end of the day, provide a better educational environment for all of our students.
Perfect. Yeah.
Just a thought.
It's a great thought. So before we get going, thanks all. I'm getting ready to get us out of here. Before we get going, though, I got a game for you if you want to play it. Since we're game on teachers. Game on. We're going to call this instant activity. I want you two to work together. All right.
Ready, champ?
Yeah, you got
do
it.
it.
I'm going to give you a theme and then some pieces of equipment. And then I'm going to give you, let's say 60 seconds. We're going to make Andy do some work here. He's going to find some like music, some themed music that you can put in.
We got a little dude.
Yeah, sure. We'll do the SpongeBob thing, like 3 hours later.
Yeah. Which it might take that long.
I want you guys to come up with an instant activity or a warm up. Okay. It could just be anything, right? Just with the equipment that I have. Okay. So we've got a strand on the Virginia SOLs called Energy Balance. Okay. Which relates to like food groups and caloric intake and healthy hydration options, all that stuff. I'm gonna say that the theme is grocery shopping. Okay, with an Energy Balance. You've got a class of, let's call them, were you elementary when you were teaching, Tom?
Elementary and middle.
Okay, and you're elementary.
I was the same, elementary.
All right, let's call it 5th grade then. That's right in the middle, sweet spot.
Sounds great.
A class of 5th graders, and you've got a bunch of hula hoops and a bunch of beanbags. Okay, this is going to be a warm-up as soon as they come in. Can you two come up with an activity for that class of 23 5th graders?
23 fifth graders. So recap: 23
5th graders.
I got hoops.
You got hoops.
I got beanbags.
You got beanbags.
Focus on energy balance.
Focus on
Focusing on
energy.
energy balance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I've got different color bean bags. Let's just bounce it back and forth.
There you go.
Okay.
Okay. We got different color bean bags with each color being a different food group.
There you go. All right. Oh, I'm supposed to go? Is this how this works?
It's like, he's gonna be a leader in this group project here. And I was like, no, I'm co-signing everything. Keep
That's why
going.
we're adding 3 hours later.
Yes, Tom, continue.
You can bounce it back if you need some more processing. But
I mean, so I'm thinking like a relay activity where using the hoops, now they're collecting these beanbags, colored beanbags that are connected to the food groups. And, I was just thinking if you have 4 hula hoops, you got 4 groups that are collecting these. And I don't know if you have a certain amount of, maybe it's connected to our nutrition guides, just in terms of, all right, how many veggies do you need each day? How many fruits do you need? And now they're collecting that, those number of bean bags connected to the colors in the food groups.
and my students have a grocery list because they need a visual. So they've got, all these different things that they need to figure out.
Is the grocery list up somewhere? Is it put up on the wall?
Yeah, it's put up on the wall. It's also on clipboards if people need it to move.
taking notes.
And then my only other initial thought, because I know I've got a couple students in chairs that are going to struggle to move around quickly, they're given a flashlight. And when they point the flashlight, that is them selecting their food group.
Perfect.
Yeah. I was just thinking too, I don't know, I'm going back to COVID days, but I just remember we did like I don't know, I set up like a virtual, like you're in a grocery store. So I had like a visual of like just somebody like doing like a walk in a grocery store. And then I think I used a video editing thing, and I like pause the video and like they had to choose between, which one is dairy.
Okay.
Food groups.
Yeah.
I know it's not the equipment that we have, but
No, it's-
maybe it's connected to, maybe they're seeing it on the screen, but then they're making selection here.
Okay.
He said minimal equipment, so you just warmed it up. I loved it.
Yeah. Yeah. Depends on your school budget.
Yeah,
Some of us only have hula hoops and beans. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me today, Tom and Adam. Thank you for your time and your knowledge. I appreciate it so much. And thank the listener for hanging out with us. Yeah, we'll catch you on the next lap of Fit Connection. I'm Stevie Gray.
Fit Connection is produced by Blue Ridge PBS in collaboration with the Virginia Department of Education. Hosted by Stevie Ray Gray. With assistance from VDOE Health, Physical, Family Life, and Driver Education Coordinator Jen Vetter. The Blue Ridge PBS production staff includes podcast producer Andy Depew, editor Calvin Loverood, senior graphics producer Jay Prater, and director of educational innovation Tom Landon. Subscribe to the Fit Connection podcast on Amazon, Spotify, Apple Music, and the Blue Ridge Echo YouTube channel.